Okay, so I want you to picture something. Imagine you've just wrapped up the field work for a massive project.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's that PhD you've been working on forever, or some big market research study.
The high-stakes kind.
Exactly. And you're just sitting there staring at this folder on your computer that is absolutely exploding with information. You've got hours of audio, you've got survey responses, PDFs.
Ah, yes. The mountain of data moment. That's where all the excitement from the field work just turns into panic.
Total panic.
Mm.
Because you know the answer, the story is in there somewhere. But right now, it just looks like noise. It's so overwhelming. So the question is, how do you even start to find the signal in all of that?
So that is the classic researcher's dilemma. I mean, you've gathered all the raw data, but you are completely missing the why. And this is the tricky part.
Why is that?
Well, because unlike numbers in a spreadsheet, human language is it's messy, it's unstructured, sometimes it's contradictory.
And there's just so much of it.
So much.
And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're doing a deep dive into qualitative data analysis, and we're going to focus on a tool called NVivo that's designed to sort of tame that chaos.
Right.
We're pulling our insights from the guide Mastering Qualitative Data Analysis with NVivo, and the mission for today is pretty straightforward. How do we go from that terrifying pile of transcripts to a credible, solid conclusion without completely losing our minds?
Or losing the data itself. That's the real risk. If you don't have a system, you're just leaving insights on the table.
So, to make this less abstract, let's stick to the scenario that the source material lays out. I think it helps to have a concrete example.
Good idea.
So we're going to imagine we're researchers. We're doing a study on leadership styles in multinational corporations.
A perfect example, because,
Yeah.
You can't just send a survey to a CEO that asks, are you a good leader? Check yes or no. It doesn't work.
No, you need the nuance.
You need to talk to them. You need to hear the stories.
Okay, so we've done the interviews. We've got transcripts from 20 different managers talking about everything, their teams, their struggles, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the old school way, and I definitely did this in college, was to print everything out, buy a 12-pack of highlighters, and just cover the entire living room floor with paper.
The floor method, it's a classic. It's
Yeah.
nostalgic, sure, but it is so dangerous. It's so prone to error. You can't search anything. And if you lose one sticky note,
Or spill your coffee.
or spill your coffee, you might lose your key finding. And the point of our source here is that NVivo, it isn't just a digital highlighter. It's more like a project management tool, but for your brain.
Okay, for your brain. I like that.
It lets you handle a volume of information that we can't hold in our heads all at once.
So let's start at the beginning of that workflow, the repository. The source calls NVivo a centralized repository, which sounds a little corporate, honestly.
It does.
Why is that a big deal? Why is it more than just a folder on my desktop?
Well, think of it less like a folder and more like an ecosystem.
An ecosystem.
Yeah, because when people think qualitative analysis, they just think interview transcripts. But real research is rarely that clean.
Right. So in our leadership scenario, we have the interviews, sure, but we might also have, say, an employee satisfaction survey with those open-ended comments.
Precisely. And maybe you've got the company's official code of conduct as a PDF and a few academic articles on leadership theory. And NVivo lets you pull all of that into one project. You're not jumping between Word and a PDF reader and Excel.
But why does that matter for the actual analysis? I mean, beyond just being tidy, I can have a few windows open.
It's all about context. So let's say a manager tells you in an interview, I prioritize employee mental health above all else. That's one data point.
Okay.
But if you have that employee survey in the same project, and you can instantly see a comment from that manager's direct report saying, my boss emails me at midnight on Saturdays, now you have a conflict.
So having it all in one place lets you spot those contradictions immediately.
It keeps the research honest. It lets you triangulate. You aren't just taking the manager's word for it. You're checking it against everything else in the ecosystem.
Okay, so all the data is in one place. Now we get to the word that I think scares a lot of people, coding.
Yeah.
When I hear coding, I think I need to learn Python. I'm picturing a black screen with green text.
No. Put the hacker hoodie away. In this world, coding is just a fancy word for tagging. It's just organizing your data.
Okay, tagging.
You're just assigning a label to a chunk of text to give it meaning.
The source material talks a lot about nodes. This seems like the key building block of NVivo. Walk me through what a node is.
Okay, a node is, just visualize it as a bucket, a container for a specific idea.
A bucket, simple enough.
So in our leadership study, Let's say you want to track how managers talk about crisis management.
Yeah.
You create a node and you call it crisis management. Then you read through your transcripts. And every single time a manager mentions a fire drill or a budget cut or a PR disaster, you highlight that bit of text and you drag it into the crisis management node.
So I'm basically collecting all the mentions of that one topic into one digital bucket.
Exactly. But here's where it gets smarter than just a bucket. You can have hierarchies. So you can have parent nodes and child nodes. This is where the real depth starts to show up.
Give me an example of that for our study.
Okay, so crisis management is pretty broad, right? It's too big of a topic. As you're reading, you might notice that manager A handles a crisis by blaming others, while manager B handles it by working overtime.
And manager C calls a million meetings.
Exactly. So you can make those subnodes that live inside the main crisis management parent node.
I see. So later on, I can look at everything about crisis, or I can get really specific and say, just show me every time someone blames someone else.
That's it. And that structure, that hierarchy is so crucial. If you don't build it, you just end up with a flat list of 1,000 topics, which is just as messy as the raw data you started with.
And realizing that blaming is a theme in the first place, that's something I have to do as the researcher, right? By reading the text.
Yes, that's called thematic coding. It's the manual, ground-up approach. The themes emerge from the data itself. You didn't know blaming was a thing until you saw it happen 3 times, so you create a node for it. That's the gold standard.
The source also talks about auto-coding. And I've got to say, that sounds very appealing. The easy button.
It is the efficiency button, but it's a dangerous one if you trust it blindly.
How so?
Auto-coding basically tells the computer to scan for specific words. So you could say, hey, NVivo, find every paragraph that contains the word budget and put it in a financial node.
I can see the problem there already.
Go on.
Well, one manager could say, I absolutely hate dealing with the budget. And another could say, I love the budget. They both go into the same bucket, but the meaning, the sentiment, is completely opposite.
Exactly. Or what if someone says, I don't worry about our financial planning, and never uses the word budget? The machine misses it completely.
So it's a blunt instrument.
The very blunt instrument. It's good for a first pass, maybe to get a general sense of things, but it can't replace human interpretation. It organizes the mess. It doesn't explain it.
Okay, so we've imported our data, we've coded it into our buckets and sub-buckets. Now comes the part where I think a lot of people get stuck. The so what phase. How do we go from a list of topics to an actual insight?
This is step 3, generating insights. And this is where NVivo goes from being a filing cabinet to being an analytical partner. The simplest tool it has is called word frequency.
Just counting words, that seems pretty basic.
It is basic, but the implication is powerful. In our leadership study, let's say you run a word frequency query across all 20 interviews. If the top words are team, growth, and future, you probably have a visionary, positive culture. But what if the top words are deadline, cost, and compliance?
You've got a fear-based culture.
Right. It's a quick temperature check. It confirms your gut feeling with actual data. But then you get to the feature that really feels like science fiction. And the source spends a good bit of time on this. It's called sentiment analysis.
Yeah, I was reading this section and I had to stop for a second. The software can actually read the emotion behind the words.
It tries to. It uses algorithms to score text as positive, negative, or neutral.
And is that reliable? Really?
It's surprisingly good at picking up on intensity. Now, it can struggle with things like sarcasm or very dry humor. But for a corporate study like ours, it's powerful. The real magic is when you combine it with your nodes.
Okay, so sentiment plus nodes, what does that look like?
Let's take your remote work node. You've gathered all the text where managers talked about working from home. You then run sentiment analysis on just that node. You might find that 80% of the comments specifically about remote work are flagged as negative.
Wow, that's a headline. Managers overwhelmingly negative about remote work.
Exactly. And you didn't just guess it because one guy sounded grumpy. You have a metric. You can say there is a statistically significant negative sentiment there. That turns a hunch into a finding.
That is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But the one feature that the source seemed most excited about, and the one that confused me the most, was matrix coding.
Ah, the matrix. It does sound intimidating.
It does. I feel like I need to take the red pill to understand it. Break it down for me.
Okay. Just think of a simple spreadsheet. You have rows and you have columns. Matrix coding lets you cross-reference 2 different sets of codes to see where they overlap.
So in our scenario,
Let's say your rows are different types of managers. So managers with 10 plus years of experience versus managers with less than 2 years of experience.
Okay, so veteran versus rookie.
Exactly. And your columns are the themes they talked about. Let's say empathy versus efficiency.
So I could see if the rookies talk about empathy more than the veterans do.
Instantly. The matrix shows you exactly how many times those two things overlapped. And you might find something surprising. Maybe the veterans talk about empathy more, but only in the context of it being a weakness, whereas rookies talk about it as a strength.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're not just looking at what was said, but who said it and how it connects to their background.
That is the deep dive. That's where you find the really interesting stuff. You start asking the data questions. Does tenure affect views on innovation? Do managers in one office complain more than another? The matrix gives you those answers.
That feels like the bridge from just reporting what people said to actually analyzing it.
But that's it. It moves you from description to explanation. It's how you build a real theory.
Now, we're visual creatures, and the source talks a lot about visualization. We mentioned word clouds, which are great for a presentation slide. But what about visuals that help us, the researchers?
There are two big ones mentioned: hierarchy charts and concept maps.
Hierarchy charts. Is that just a picture of those parent and child nodes we talked about?
Pretty much. It often looks like a set of nested boxes. So a big box for leadership, and inside that, a smaller one for styles, and then even smaller ones for autocratic versus democratic. The size of the box shows you how much that topic was discussed.
So I can see at a glance, wow, almost nobody talked about democratic leadership.
Exactly. It shows you the weight of the conversation. And it helps you check your own bias. You might remember the one guy who talked about it because he was really engaging, but the chart reminds you he was an outlier.
Right, it forces you to look at the volume. And what about concept maps? This one sounded the most fun.
This is your detective wall. You know in crime movies where they have all the photos and the red string connecting them?
The crazy wall.
It is the professional version of the crazy wall. You drag your nodes onto a canvas and you draw lines between them to map out the relationships. You could draw a line showing that micromanagement seems to lead to low morale, which then leads to employee turnover.
It feels like that would be a huge help when you're trying to figure out how to structure your final paper.
100%. It helps you tell the story. If you can map it visually, you can write it coherently.
Speaking of that final paper step 5,
Yeah.
we have to get all this great work out of NVivo and into a document.
The whole point of the process.
Yeah.
And the source really emphasizes that using a tool like this makes your writing credible.
How so? I mean, I still have to write the actual sentences.
You do, but you can trace every single claim you make back to the raw data. So if you write, managers feel overwhelmed by bureaucracy, you can click a button and export the 20 specific quotes that support that statement. You're not just making an assertion, you're proving it with evidence.
That is the difference between an opinion piece and a dissertation right there.
Correct. It's about transparency and rigor. Your reader can trust your conclusions because they can see the trail.
However, there's always a however. The guide warns us about some pitfalls. It seems like students especially fall into a couple of common traps when they get their hands on this.
The biggest one is overcoding.
Is that a thing? Can you be too organized?
You can be too granular. Some people just get node happy. They make a new node for every single interesting sentence they read. They end up with 400 nodes.
Manager mentioned he likes coffee. Manager mentioned it was raining outside.
Precisely. And if everything is highlighted, then nothing is important. You dilute the analysis, you just have this fragmented mess of tiny buckets, and you can't see the big picture. The advice is to start broad. You can always split a big node later.
What about the opposite problem, being too vague?
That's the lack of theme clarity. This is when you make a node and you call it something like general thoughts or issues.
The stuff bucket.
The stuff bucket. If you put everything in stuff, you haven't actually analyzed anything. You need to be specific enough to be meaningful but broad enough to see a pattern. It's a real balancing act.
It sounds like the software amplifies your thinking. But if your thinking is messy to begin with, the software just helps you organize your mess.
That is the quote of the day. NVivo organizes your mess. It doesn't clean it for you. You still have to be the researcher. You have to make the judgment calls.
I want to circle back to something we talked about before we wrap up, that sentiment analysis feature.
It stuck with you.
It did, because it raises a bit of a philosophical question for me. If we're starting to rely on an algorithm to tell us if an interview is sad or happy, are we gaining objectivity or are we maybe losing something important?
It's the core tension of modern research, isn't it? On the one hand, the machine has no bias. It doesn't care if it liked the person it was interviewing. It doesn't get tired. It just reads the words. That's objective.
Yeah.
But human communication is all about layers. A manager might say, oh, sure, the CEO is great, with a heavy eye roll.
Right.
The software reads the word great and marks it as positive. The human researcher hears the sarcasm and knows it's deeply negative.
So the tool is a compass, not the captain.
Exactly. Use the tool to find the hot spots, to see the big picture, but always, always use your brain to understand the context, to understand the heat.
That seems like a pretty good rule for technology in general, actually.
I'd say so.
So, the takeaway for everyone listening today, whether you're tackling a huge dissertation or just trying to make sense of customer feedback, don't let that mountain of data intimidate you.
Structure it, code it, and most importantly, question it.
And maybe use the crazy wall feature just to feel like a detective for a day.
Highly recommended.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Hopefully your next research project feels a little less like chaos.
And a little more like a story that's just waiting to be told.
We'll catch you on the next one.